When I first graduated with my bachelor's, I had a dual major, economics and music, and I really wanted to be an opera singer. But I was just like, oh, I'm just like saddled with this overwhelming debt. I felt so guilty about having this debt that I thought would like burden us for the long term. Is mathematically very simple, and like the concepts of it are super simple, so everyone beats themselves up about it. Like, how come I can't figure this out? Like, it's like all these sayings like live on less than you earn. And it's because it's so built in. There's so much psychology and like baggage built into our minds when it comes to finances. And so that's what people compare up. They don't compare down typically. And so there's like this expectation gap that causes like internal suffering for them.
Could you take us back to 2017? As I understand, you graduated with an MBA and you realize that you're sitting on six figures of debt, which is no fun. What did that moment feel like? Can you take us back to the emotions and thought processes?
Absolutely. So I was still living in New York, and when I first graduated with my bachelor's, I had a dual major in economics and music, and I really wanted to be an opera singer in my 20s. I mean, I am an opera singer, but
Aren't we
I
all?
wanted that to be my full-time thing. So
That's cool.
uh, I graduated, however, like during the Great Recession. And so jobs were kind of slim, and they were kind of like sales, insurance, like anything like that.
Hmm.
It was kind of slim pickings. Um, and so I decided to stay in school, and I got my master's in music. And then I worked for startups like right out. I was able to get a job working for a commercial startup in the energy space that was pretty nascent, the solar energy space in New York. So that was like pretty nascent in the 2010s. And it was super exciting. I got to wear a lot of hats and see how startups work, and how you do marketing, and how you do operations, and how you deal with bureaucracy, and like all of these things. So that was super exciting. Then I went back to, also during that time, I worked with a lot of big building owners because we were pitching rooftop solar. And so I kind of, it was, not on my radar because we had just gone through the financial crash, which was, heavily correlated to real estate. So that wasn't exactly top of mind as a viable career path. However, I was talking to lots of building owners, and they were like, we're buying all this stuff like on the cheap, right? And so that was actually part of their business projections, was like, oh, we can actually buy these big portfolios of real estate while they're at depressed asset prices. And so I was like, huh, this is so interesting. Like, I just got the real estate bug. So then I decided to go back for my MBA, and with a focus on commercial real estate. So all of this was exciting. I was like wanting to pivot into commercial real estate and get my career off the ground. um, I was also kind of like dissatisfied with my opera career. I was like kind of doing okay, but like not enough to live comfortably. So I was trying to do that pivot. And then when I completed my MBA, it was a very exciting time, but I was just like, oh, I'm just like saddled with this overwhelming debt, because when you pivot, you're often coming into like whatever foot in the door analyst type role. It's not, you're not going to be making like the big bucks right out of the gate.
Hmm.
So I was like, oh my gosh, like I now have all these degrees, but like a ton of debt. And my then boyfriend, now husband, Mike, and I wanted to combine our lives together. We had been doing like long distance. I met him in the army, and we wanted to combine our lives and like get married and buy a house and all these things. And I felt so guilty about having this debt that I thought would like burden us for the long term. So I was just super motivated to get out of the debt so that I could just like get on with my life.
Hmm. Yeah, thanks for that story. There's a couple of areas I'd like to double click on. I suppose starting at the end there, talking about debt and guilt. Shame is another emotion that comes up. Perhaps I understand you've kind of thought about this and speak about this, and there's a huge problem, as you know better than anyone, with debt in the United States in particular, and broadly speaking, globally. It seems like the more developed an economy, the more indebted it is. Um, what is the correlation between like guilt, shame, and finances, and why does it seem to be a vicious cycle?
Yes, this is super interesting. With the I think that the reason it's sparks so much shame and guilt is because it's something that is mathematically very simple, and like the concepts of it are super simple, so everyone beats themselves up about it. Like, how come I can't figure this out? Like, it's like all these sayings like live on less than you earn. Like, that's such a simple concept, so it seems like it should be an easy thing to do.
Mm,
So
right.
people really are like, why am I underwater? Like, why is this not as easy as it seems? And it's because it's so built in. There's so much psychology and like baggage built into our minds when it comes to finances, like, presumably from childhood and like the way you grew up and the messaging that was implanted in your brain from your parents and
Mm,
um, maybe also like the expectation gap of like, I should be here at this point in my life. And like, I think the debt piece is super entwined with it, and that's such a astute observation you made about, like, the first world countries having even more debt. These are absolutely correlated because so much of the, um, external view of people's progression is fueled by debt. Like, we don't actually have access to these things without credit lines.
mhm,
So there's like this um, perception that people are further along than they actually are.
mhm,
And so that's what people compare up. They don't compare down
mhm,
typically. And so there's like this expectation gap that causes like internal suffering for them. Like, I should be here, but I am nowhere near there. And yeah, so I think that's why it's so difficult. I think I've heard this over and over when I talk with prospects and clients that even when they think they're like at the point they know they have a problem, they're like, I think I need some help, like external help to get this under control. Some of them tell me, I was sitting on booking a call with you for a long time because I just thought, what, this is like an easy thing. Like,
mhm.
why can't I
Yeah.
figure this out on my own? Like, I should be able to figure this out on my own. One aha moment I had working at the commercial real estate company, which really changed my life. So from 2017 to 2020 on a starter salary, I cleaned up the debt. Was in business school, you learn all these abstract theories about finance. But then when I started working with high net worth individuals who are buying these multi-million dollar properties, and I was like managing these operating budgets and seeing how they were thinking and working through the business models, I was like, oh my goodness, they do budgeting strategically and they project outcomes and then they reverse engineer the steps to get there, which is like completely different than how I thought I was like budgeting with my Excel spreadsheet and like,
Mhm,
okay, I have my income and I have my expenses and that's cash flow management. That is not outcomes based budgeting. So that was a huge unlock. I was like, "Oh my goodness, I've been like budgeting all wrong." Like, I actually had no plan to clean up the debt. I had a plan to pay the minimum payment.
mm. Could you talk a little bit about what your month-to-month system looked like regarding the, like, buckets or rules and how you ran your money ops?
Sure, yeah. So, I have what's called my Money Simple method, which is another acronym. I talk about my ARIA method, so that ties to my singing. That's like the money mindset stuff, in my book. But I also have operationally another acronym that I created, which is the Money Simple method. And I think it's like, um, I think this is like my insights and what helped me figure this out. So simple is start with a SMART goal. And like the T in SMART is for time bound. And I think this is like a piece that gets lost is okay, I can pay this off, but at the rate that I'm paying, how long is this gonna take me?
Mm,
And like, okay, if I want to shorten that time frame, what trade-offs do I need to make? And then like figuring out the levers to pull to get there.
mm,
So starting with a smart goal that's time bound, and then taking an inventory of income and expenses. And then this is like asset management thing, but like M, MP, and L are minus for cutting expenses, plus for increasing income, and then L for doing a line by line review.
mm,
And so you do these things, and it's like it's the concept of zero based budgeting. So there's like two versions of this. There's the personal finance version, which is income minus expenses equals zero. And so like accounting for every dollar. And then there's a corporate version of it that I really like, which is every year we're going to start a budget from zero and you have to justify each expense. And then E is for execute. So I do this thing like I do like aggressive aggressive zero based budgeting, but with like time limits in there. So it's basically like asset management underwriting techniques applied to personal finance.
okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. And what did you set the time at 3 years? Was that on target, under target? Could you explain how
My
you arrived at 3
original
years?
goal was 5 years, and I beat it.
Nice, good for
Yeah,
you.
thanks.
Um, well, you brought up a really interesting kind of intersection that I think is unusual, military and opera. Could you talk about, like, where those overlap for you and, how you kind of manage both in your day-to-day?
Sure. Okay, so when I was a child, I was a violinist at first, and I also, like, sang at church, so I, like, knew I could sing, and then when I got to high school, I also, did, like, musicals and, like, really started discovering that I had a talent for singing. Then in college, I started in music. My mother was like, "Hey, like, I think you should also do something other than music." So I took economics because that was of interest to me from, like, a class I took in senior year. And then after my first year of college, a recruiter approached me from the Army Reserve and said, "Hey, like, actually, um, you can go join the Army Reserve as a vocalist and have some, like, school expenses paid."
What does a
And I
vocalist do in the service?
Oh, a ton actually. So you do, like, ambassadorial events, you sing the national anthem a million
Ah,
times for
okay.
everything. There's, like,
Nice,
there's a lot of, military ceremonies. I've, like, sang for, like, at the mayor's mansion in New York and,
nice.
like, just all these political events and, like,
That would
venue
be, like,
openings and
psychological, psychologically profound to see the opposing forces singing opera. Um, a new strategy.
that's funny. Um Yeah, so you actually do quite a bit of work if you're a musician in the Army Reserve or, like, in the Army.
Well, music is so powerful.
It's so
They're
powerful.
still studying it, like what it does to our minds, and opera especially has a lot to do with precision, and I'm sure managing emotions. Does some of that translate into like your high performance?
Absolutely, yes. So, like, with singing, I think did I answer your first question, though? I think I didn't, like, quite.
I might have
Yeah.
interrupted you. Please feel free to
Oh, no,
expand
that's
on
okay.
where the
I
two
think I
overlap
did,
for you.
actually. You asked me how they came together. So, actually, like, directly because I was singing in the military, so that's how that came about.
Yeah, I didn't
And
even
then
think about that.
yeah, yeah, and then, to answer your question about performance, um 100%. With singing, I remember, like, first of all, when you go on stage, or, like, your heart just starts to flutter, like, you have to control your stage fright. It's something that took me, like, several years
I could
to
barely
get a handle
speak.
on.
Like I can't imagine singing.
Yes, it's, like, all about, like, breath compression and, like, efficiency of breath release and all this stuff. So,
Could you walk us through that at like a high level? Like, what does that mean? Breath compression.
okay, so think about, a balloon or even a baby. These are 2. So think about a baby. They don't have any of the habits that adults have as far as, like, speech patterns or, like, vocal fry or, like, any of these things with the voice. They naturally produce loud sounds.
Okay.
So, like, their chords coming together efficiently, their, like, breath pressure, think of that like a balloon. If you were to release all the air, it could either come out all at once, or you could squeeze the air through and have a high pitched sound come out. So that's kind of what your body is as an instrument and what you're doing with opera.
Are you controlling
Um,
your throat like the aperture or something?
it's really, I talk about this in my book actually, because I feel like there's, kind of, lessons to be learned with unlearning bad behaviors, unlearning, like, you're not forcing anything, you're just allowing the instrument to naturally do what it's supposed to do. So you're actually unlearning behaviors when it
Yeah.
comes to learning opera.
Well, I
Yeah.
imagine almost discovering yourself along the process.
Discovering the full power of your natural voice and, like, what your body can naturally do.
Yeah. Fascinating. I didn't want to derail us. I just wanted to understand a little bit more of like the
Yeah,
mechanics
no,
of
I
opera
love all
because,
these questions, it's great. So, to bring it back to your performance
yeah.
question, um, yeah, so at a high level, I would say when you they say in the opera world that, like, no one's ever gonna hear your best day of singing, it's gonna be, like, at home practicing or,
Mm,
like, in in the bathroom or whatever. Uh, so y if you are going to have a performance career, your average has to be great, and, like, uh, so being able to not just perform when all the conditions are correct and when all the variables line up, but being able to perform tired, being able to perform, when you've just traveled, uh, being able to perform when you're sad and you had a bad day, um, like, just your average has to be higher, than the field.
mhm.
Um, and, there's a lot of lessons I learned in my 20s with, like, okay, what does my mental preparation look like? And a lot of it is just the way that you practice is the way that you're gonna show up, and so you have to mimic those conditions, um, and, like, really just get that muscle memory going. And then,
Mhm.
like, at some point, I had a teacher who said that the creative side of the brain and the brain that does the actual execution are, like, opposites, and so you can't, like, judge yourself while you're doing the thing. So you have to keep them, apart. So then at some point, so many things I had to undo with, like, psychologically. Like, I would, like, practice too much, and then I would be tired, and then I would be, like, the muscle memory would be of the tired version. Like, so,
Mhm.
like, practicing it in a, like, a good state
Right.
is good. And then, also, like, okay, what do I need to do the day of to mentally prepare? And then okay, what about 5 minutes before? Then I'm just like, you got like, how do I pep up myself and just release and, like, lean into the joy of singing and, like, express the character and all of that. Because, how do you get out of your own way mentally
Mhm.
as well? So there's so much tied into, like, just high performance in
Mhm.
general and, like, presentation.
There's a lot in that that I'd love to unpack lightly in this short conversation. But speaking of like high performance and unlearning, you mentioned how the baby is not yet like programmed to speak in a different way or whatever, if program's a fair word to use. And it seems like a lot of life is like losing ourselves and finding ourselves again, and that we're simultaneously capable of a lot more than we know, but trying to apply ourselves in the wrong way. So there's like this escapism or compensation for like an underlying feeling like, oh, I could do better, I should do better, but you're kind of applying it in the wrong way. Or like, hey, Veronica, watch me make this trick shot, and then I flub it or whatever, flub it, I mess up because I'm aware of you're watching me and I want to like impress you. And like you mentioned the brain, like that part of the brain is not the part of the brain that helps me perform. And so you're kind of, or if you have stage fright or something like that, you're kind of like fixated on this like inner critic is just shutting down your capacity. for performance. And then when like, no one's looking, you do this trick shot like 10 times in a row. It's like,
Yep.
why wasn't anyone there to see that? It's because like you weren't there, like you weren't present. And so it's anyway, that's what came up to me. My trick shots in the bathroom that no one sees. And just how it pertains to like how we operate. So I'm thinking like, you know, diet, like overeating, indebtedness, like some of the problems that kind of plague us in the modern world. I at least maybe I'm over indexing here, but I see this kind of pattern with losing ourselves and trying to find ourselves again. And anyway, that's what came up with your message there.
That's cool. Yeah, it's so true. Like we go down these paths of that are set by external expectations and not actually aligned with like, reflection of ourselves and really stopping and thinking, is this strategic? Is this going in the right direction? And we just kind of get pulled along by momentum and whatever we think we should be doing. And then we wake up one day and we're like, crap, I'm down the wrong road. need to need to reconfigure, recalibrate.
Play devil's advocate there. I agree, by the way, but just to play devil's advocate and kind of push our brain, because I mentor some folks and I also get mentored myself, and so I try to apply this kind of frame when I hear that, because I've been down what I would consider the wrong road, and it's part of life. I think it's part of learning, and I don't think there's a way to like skip it. Like if you have kids or you just care for someone else and you'd like them to not step in the puddle that you stepped in, sometimes people just aren't ready to receive the message. It can be like a seed that gets planted and then germinated in the moment of regret. And that is the binding agent that allows you to become the next version of yourself. And you
Mhm.
can't really deliver it, uh, I may contradict myself in a moment, but you can't really deliver it in a book or a speech. I say contradict because I do think those things are important, but sometimes you can't like internalize it uh, holistically immediately. And so, yeah, I think part of going down the wrong road is also part of the process.
Yeah, I think that like people who consume self-development content would hope that they can like pull lessons from others. But even in starting this financial coaching business, like, yes, mentors can tell me something. However, I learn the lesson more deeply through pain and then like reconfiguring. And then I'm like, oh, that's what they were trying to tell me. So I think that just internalizing the message is different than just like hearing it and being like, yeah, that makes sense. But like really living and internalizing it is different. And that can only be done in hindsight.
There's something else that you said that resonated with me, and I think might be a helpful kind of tool to have in our toolkit is you're probably never seeing anyone at their best or their worst. So we have tendencies to like categorize binary, like, oh, this person's like a deity, like, celebrities or performers or something, and like over indexing that way. And then also maybe under indexing our colleagues and thinking that they're not as capable as perhaps they could, or ourselves to that earlier message. And just kind of having that healthy frame that um, you need to do the work to ensure that your average is above baseline so that there's a higher probability that you can like hit your chords or whatever when you're on stage, and meet your targets when you're asked to on a team or whatever.
Yeah, totally. Using opera as an example, you can be born with a level of talent. There are definitely some people that have innate talents and strengths in different areas and should lean into it
Hmm.
because it's just easy for them. And you can tell, like, okay, they just have God given talent. However, that only goes so far. And like, it's the ones because especially in this day and age where there's, like, so much information to be had and it's, like, difficult to get an edge, um, the ones who have the edge are the ones who have the innate talent, but also have have discipline and
Hmm.
apply strategically. Like,
Hmm.
when they're able to combine those things, that is really what you're saying. And that took me a while to learn, oh, that's just, like, lived experience where you're like, you see someone you admire and I no longer think like, "Oh, like, they just have a God-given talent." I'm like, "They have God-given talent plus a ton of reps," you know? So
Well, plus a lot of reps, and also I think wisdom or clarity of thought to apply their calories in the direction that their strengths already lie. That was kind of my aha moment in business school. Was I felt that I had to spend like 20%. Like if you think like a pie chart, I thought I had to spend like 20% equally in
Mhm.
all like areas to balance out like my weaknesses. So I would just be like perfectly bland. And then
Mm.
business school taught me like it's a better ROI to focus on your strengths.
Mhm.
And then I figured, okay, well, I'm just going to like accept that I have certain areas that I'm not strong in. Um, and then I'll network for that. And I'll apply my
Mhm.
strengths in ways that are valuable to the people who have strengths I don't. And waha, it's like it's almost like, this is how we got here. But it was like it's weird where I felt I was like misapplying my calories. And when you to your point, when you see like a celebrity or an athlete or someone like at a high level, to give them credit, I think they're if they are really good at what they do, there's also perhaps the right application of their calories.
Mm. Yeah. Oh, I see this everywhere, like in business and opera. For in opera, I and you know what? Like, there's a generic application here too, where if you hear the same message over and over from mentors or like people that you work with, like that you're good at something, you should kind of like hone in on that because um, within opera, there are like subcategories and niches that you could do, and I think I just wasn't tuning into that, and when I started tuning into, "Oh, you're very good at this particular repertoire," that's when I started getting more work, and, like, was like, "Oh, okay. This is very like, this is how people see me, this is what my voice naturally does, like, this is the meat and potatoes of how I can get hired." And then same thing in the business space, and, I've been a manager in my financial technology company before and had reports and, like, shaped their career growth, and I'm like, "Oh, you're really good at this thing," and once they lean into those things and same thing with me. I think also for me, I can't, I'm, like, very bad at like, it's very obvious when I don't like something or it's just such an like, such an uphill battle to go against what you're good at, and so, like, why not just ride that, like, ride
Mhm,
your natural strengths and, like, use that as a differentiation point for yourself?
mhm.
It's just, like, it's good all around, it's a win-win situation.
Absolutely. Could you walk us through your ARIA money model, and maybe also talk about which step is the most confronting for people?
Yes. So my ARIA money model, I talk about in my book, Making Money is Simple. It's the framework that got me from stuck to free with money. And so A is for Awaken. That's when you're sort of have that come to Jesus moment of I'm kind of having a problem here and it needs to be addressed. So that's sort of opening your eyes to the problem. Then R is for reframe. That's where you reconsider your default habits and your relationship with money. This is the definitely the step that people get caught up on. Um, is like reconsidering and re-navigating your relationship with money. Then I is for setting a new intention for your relationship with money and taking responsibility over your current situation. And then A is for taking action. So yeah, that reframe step is the confronting, and
Mhm.
so you can go from awaken and then stay in that sort of reframe stage for a while.
And you've experienced coaching that created this clarity and changed your direction. Could you talk about what made that coach effective?
Yeah, so I talk about this in the book. Had I am a military spouse. My husband is active duty army, and so we move every so often.
If I could
And
interrupt for a moment, have you ever
sure.
seen Arrested Development, the TV show?
Yes.
Okay. When Buster says, "I'm going to army," I love that, like, just
Aw.
dropping the it
That's
sounds,
funny.
like, so cute. But sorry, please continue. Every time I hear
Yes.
army, I think of Buster.
Oh, that's funny. So I have to move every so often, and it's with my career, it's like a mostly regional, mostly regional career. So every market that I've moved to, I'm sort of starting from scratch. And so I moved 4 years ago to the Pacific Northwest, and it was like the tail end of COVID. And so I had been living in Texas, and I was singing with Austin Opera and like had my, you know, I had like my inroads there. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I need to start all over again and in this new region. And I'm an unknown. And we were coming out of COVID, and everybody, people were flying in for like regional opera houses. It was pretty wild to audition. Like there were just huge wait lists. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm never going to get a foot in the door if nobody knows who I am. And there's cattle call lines that are like 300 people deep. And we have like 2 minutes. It's like, I'm never like, how am I ever going to get? So one of my good friends who had been his own agent for 15 years prior, and I happened to go to grad school with, he was running this like boot camp for booking your own gigs. And I thought that was interesting. And he also had a real estate background. So we like shared that, like, oh, they're like, we're an opera singer and real estate. Like, I think this is pretty cool. So I took his boot camp and I was like, oh my goodness, he's taking all the best aspects of business and applying them to opera. Like, this is amazing. This is so natural. And like, why didn't I think of this before? So he created a CRM, had like different niches and different categories, and would like source his leads. And it's just a volume game at that point. And like understanding that your product market fit to, tie that together of like understanding what my voice naturally does and like where I can get hired. So it was just, there were so many connections and intersections there that were so beautiful. And it was like really nice to be able to put it together. But I think because I had this hang up in my brain that like, oh, if people in business know that I'm a musician, they're going to not take me seriously. And then like vice versa. If people in the singing world know that I work a full-time job, they're not going to take me seriously. Like, oh, she's not 100% whatever.
Hmm.
I had that as a mental block for a long, long time. And it was like super shy about ever mentioning it on both spheres. And then it was like, oh my goodness, this intersection is what unlocked the ability for me to have like a full calendar of gigs.
Hmm. That's really interesting. Once again, something that resonated with me with what you shared there was this kind of duality of listening to other people's feedback because they probably see things that you don't, understand things that you don't, but then also listening to your own inner voice because sometimes other people are wrong. Like maybe they're right, but it's the wrong time. You see this in investing, for example, where some venture capitalists will be kicking themselves 5 years later and be like, the company was in my office and I turned them down. And yet there's other startups that get rejected 10 times and feel like they're never going to make it. And there's a lot of like detail and I guess opportunity that in um, new ways. And so it was just kind of sense making in ambiguity. I don't know if
Hmm.
that's uh, as clear as your answer, but that was something that kind of came up with what you shared there, with applying like real estate and opera, and surpass or sidestepping the cattle call 300. That sounds pretty harrowing. I guess that um, in one way, each person there is demonstrating a lot of perseverance and clarity under pressure. But still, I don't like those chances because
Yeah.
if there's only one position, like
Exactly.
there's probably 10 or 20 people that would have done great that just, there's no room. So I like that. And you've always, and I'll try not to talk your ear off, but one more thing that came up was conversations we're seeing about the disruption from AI and what
Hmm.
that might do for the job market. And to what you shared there, I think just like kind of pushing on a wall and making a new kind of door. Um, because I think we need to constantly evolve and
Hmm.
think creatively. And perhaps I would think anyway that you're moving around and needing to plug into new environments. Um, you might have developed over time this superpower with kind of entrepreneurship or at least entrepreneurial thinking, networking, what I like to call outsider insights. So like these insights that only an outsider could have because
Mhm.
they're fresh.
Mhm.
Of course, going back to the trade off, you need to have some self awareness and not try to over apply what you don't yet fully understand. But at the same time, don't let other people tell you it can't be done
Mhm.
because they might be blinded by the status quo. So,
Totally.
anyway,
Totally.
those are some thoughts that came up with what you shared.
That's really cool. Yeah, I love, like, the multidisciplinary tying, taking lessons from one field and applying it to another in a novel way. I think that stuff is super cool. I think also, when you are in a new market and, like, one thing I like to do is be very aware of where I'm hitting resistance or, like, something that's annoying. Typically, that's when I have, like, creative insights because 'cause I'm like, "This is annoying, like, why is this so difficult to do?" And then you're like, "Hmm, maybe there's an opportunity there." Or, like, paying attention to just, um, themes of, like, okay, there was one muscle that I thought in my early real estate days, like, you gain market discernment over time through, like, pattern recognition, but that's, like that can be applied to any field, so, like, the ability to see patterns, and then also I like to think, like, unpack that and say, what prompts or, like, what questions can I, check in with myself to be able to gain those insights?
Mhm,
So, like, that general question of where is there something annoying?
mhm.
And, like, is there a business opportunity in there? Like, where are people feeling a pain
Yeah.
point?
One more thought that came up with pattern recognition um, is we don't yet know the scale that we're playing at. So, like a trillion sounds like a big number to us, but it might be a tiny number in terms of like the whole universe of numbers. And so when we see a pattern, it's like, oh, this unlocked this thing in the 20th century, but we don't know what could be unlocked in the 21st century, for example. Or if you think of like a safe combination, you're turning the dial clockwise until you hear this click. And it's like, okay, if I turn it clockwise, I'll hear a click. And you keep turning it the second time clockwise and nothing happens because you're supposed to turn it the other way. And so it's like, and then you're like, okay, now I'm supposed to turn it left. And you keep, you know what I mean? So it's like this
Yeah.
weird, like you recognize a pattern, but you don't recognize the macro pattern. Like you spotted a micro pattern, and then there's like the super molecule of pattern cross synthesis that you talked about. And so anyway, it's fascinating. Like we don't know the end state of our growth. But it's more just, I think, picking up these signals and navigating it as best as we can.
Yeah, I think that's one of the valuable, applications of having a mentor is it particularly, like, I find my sweet spot to be someone who's, like, 10 years older than me typically, like, someone who's, like and it doesn't have to be age really, but, someone who's, like, a few steps ahead, but not, like, so far ahead that they don't remember the pain
I
directly,
see.
and, like,
Yeah.
maybe the operating environment, the variables are different at that you know, like, there are general lessons, but, like, the specific tactics may be retired by then.
Hmm.
So someone who is, like, a few steps ahead and, like, preferably still active in the field and has, their ear to the ground kinda thing, those are, like, great mentors.
Yeah, that's great. And I also think mentoring others is as part of the package as well. Um, I think everyone should have both a mentor and a mentee because there's just different perspectives. You learn just as much, I think, from each relationship, but just in different ways.
Yeah, I agree with that,
Do
totally.
you have any advice for aspiring entrepreneurs and creatives when it comes to like in low financial structure?
Can you be more specific?
What are your non-negotiables if someone is building a business and has high ambition but low structure financially? We talked earlier about like buckets and maybe how to like and also working backwards from your goals. Could you maybe share for the entrepreneurs listening what or business owners listening what like how you would frame like financial growth or security for them?
Yeah, I would say, I can share from just my first year with this formal business. Um, Having data points is super helpful. Like, I'm talking about, let's say, for example, client acquisition. What's the what methods of going to market are working the best? Okay, I have 3 theories. I'm going to test them. That's another thing. Like, be open, stay open. Don't think the status quo is like what's going to work for you. Like, talking to like looping back to leaning into who you are as a brand and like what you shine in.
Mhm,
But one thing that's been super helpful for me is just gathering data. And like it's obviously helpful so that I can do the math and see, okay, what was the cheapest source of client acquisition? But also it's helpful for a mental standpoint. Because if I know that a standard is it's like recalibrating expectations so that you can deal with the roller coaster that is entrepreneurship of, "Oh, I'm having a great week and I gained 2 clients, and I'm having a bad month and I've gotten nothing."
mhm,
And so that you can look at the data points over a longer period of time and be like, "Okay, that's actually on track with average." Or like, "I'm way off, so something's got I've had need to change tactics." Like,
mhm,
I think it's helpful just just getting data points
mhm.
at first, just to have hard numbers to look at when you're making business decisions, but also to keep you sane.
Sure. Yeah, I think of the stock market charts we see where you saw how volatile Amazon was back in the day, and as you zoom in and made your decisions on that kind of analysis, it might be very different than if you zoom out and see it's tracking
Mhm.
quite well. Um, Fast forward 3 years, what does success look like for you and the people that you serve?
Um, uh, I think success for me in the next 3 years would be understanding how I can get my message out in a way, that resonates the most so that I can because my business is like a heart-driven business, and my, mission is to help people get unstuck with their money,
Mhm,
and so I want to help as many people as possible. So, like, understanding that motion, how do I get traffic in the door and, like, qualified traffic so that I we can do the precious work of, like, getting them on the right path? Because the results have been, incredible. Um, like, my we in a few weeks are able to sometimes get people out from underwater because part of my coaching business also is like the application and implementation. So I help them, do the work,
mhm.
which is like different than I think a lot of other business models that sort of just give you the information. But it's like, how do I get the message out there so that I can build up the portfolio of business?
What what purchase under $50 improved your life the most?
Books for sure. Like
Do
just
you have I know there's a loads that you probably read and liked, but does one come to mind when you mention that?
like early ones, early influences are like Dave Ramsey and like Ramit Sethi and Vicky Robin. Yeah.
And what's the most expensive mistake people make that doesn't look expensive?
Um, I would say not taking into account total cost of ownership. So just looking at minimum payment and like what they can afford and not understanding the whole picture of what they're going to pay over the lifetime.
Okay, I have a follow-on question to that because something came up when you shared that. Renting an apartment versus buying a house. What are some thoughts that people should think of? And do you strongly have a preference for one over the other?
I'm a real estate girl, so I like to, have that. But I think it's totally it depends on what the person wants out of their life. Like I know so many different people because of business and music that have totally different goals. And so if they want to be an independent musician, if they want to be a musician, they don't want to be tied down, they want to be able to travel, like don't buy a house. Why? That doesn't line up with the goal, right?
Hmm,
But if you want to like, it's totally personal. So,
mhm,
that's part of the conversation, and, I would say, like, from a home buying perspective, I'm very conservative because I don't want it to be a burden on me. Like, our first home was probably 10% of my income.
hmm. That's pretty good.
Yeah. So,
Unusual.
um, so, yeah, I think it's just, like, it depends on the person's vision for their life.
Fair. What's the best financial decision you've ever made that felt scary at the time?
Um I think, like, more expensive mentoring, coaching?
Okay.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, I'm pretty self-development. Sometimes I wonder if, I have, like, a rule for myself now, like, believe in unlocking things like paradigm shifts, like, things that you can't see yourself, like, I totally believe in that, but, one sort of, like, guardrail I've given myself is that I can't do too much at a time that I can't actually apply the
Mhm.
lessons. Like, like my time capacity, I need to be able to apply it. Even with books, for example, I've been like, "Okay, I'm only buying, like, 1 book at a time now because I
Mm.
literally cannot consume it and I cannot
Yeah.
apply it." So yeah, just being aware of being able to do the implementation so that it's not a waste.
Favorite opera?
Um, Bohème.
Bohème? What do you like about it?
The music is amazing. There's so many like, hits, let's say, in there. Yeah.
Okay.
The characters are beautiful.
Excellent. Well, this has been a real fun conversation, Veronica. Where can people find you and what message would you like to leave the audience with?
So they can find me, my book is on Amazon. They can find me at makingmoneyissimple.com. I'm also on social media at makingmoneyissimple. So those are all the ways they can find me. And I would say financial freedom doesn't happen on accident. So uh, make the decision and commitment to yourself that you are going to take action.
Okay. Well, thanks for chatting with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.